Hi BookTube! So today I will do my review of End of Story by Louise Swanson, which is a pen name for Louise Beach. This is probably my favorite book that I read in 2023. It was also published in 2023. Now I have a lot to say about this book, so let's get straight to the point. First I'll tell you what the book is about, and then I will share all my thoughts on this book, because there is a lot. So the setting of this is a novel, a dystopian novel. The setting is 2035, and it is in the UK, and it's in November, and there's a heat wave which reaches a maximum of 39 degrees Celsius. Roasting, absolutely roasting. Climate change, which is an issue for our time. Weather extremes are going to get worse and worse. So a heat wave in November in the UK. And this is set in a world where fiction, well, maybe not the world, but a country, a UK, where fiction is banned. So that means no novels, no movies, no comic books, no video games. All fiction is banned. Only documentaries and non-fiction books are allowed. So this is a world which is devoid of creativity and escapism. And as you read along, you will see how much of a horrible world that is. We follow a woman called Fern Dostoy, who was a former best-selling author in 2029 before the ban on fiction came into effect in 2030. She has been relocated to a new home. All of her fiction has been confiscated and presumably burned. And she is trying to adjust to her new life as a hospital janitor. And some government agents check in on her from time to time to make sure that she is not writing any novels, not writing any fiction. Now, Fern Dostoy eventually joins a underground group that reads bedtime stories to sleepless children over the phone at night. I think over some kind of secure line that the government cannot trace. I don't know about that, but that. And then she grows an attachment to an 8-year-old boy called Hunter, who she has a strong attachment to him, even though the relationship is only over the phone. And the story moves on from there. Now, eventually, of course, as you read along, you'll realize that nothing is as it seems. And will the government eventually track her down or take her away to a re-education center, as they call it? We don't know. So the plot is very simple enough, but the themes and my thoughts on the book are a lot. That's the basic gist of the plot. Now, at the end, there is a massive twist, which I will not give away. We're talking Second Sleep style, Robert Harris Second Sleep style twist. But the good news is, it doesn't spoil the rest of the book, and it does not take away from the world building. And also the good news about the massive twist is it's at the last fifth of the book, near the end of the book. So I can give you this review without tiptoeing around the spoiler. It's very easy to avoid it. So that is great. Now, Uh, so the book, how would I describe this book? Think, now, understand, this book is a very distinct book. It has its own unique narrative identity. I don't know the right word. It is its own unique work of fiction. It is not. It is not a rip-off of other books. But as I read it, I understand that this book stands on the shoulders of giants. So think The Handmaid's Tale meets Fahrenheit 451. You might be wondering how those two can come together. Well, the ban on fiction, the ban on novels, is reminiscent of Fahrenheit 451. There's even a plot point where there's even a point in the story where there's a group of people who memorize books in their head so that they tell it to other people in future generations. And as for The Handmaid's Tale, the narrative itself, it is not one of these. This is not one of these feminist dystopias that have become popular in recent years. This is a dystopia against people with creativity and intellectuals. So this is not a feminist dystopia, despite it being a first-person narrative from a woman, a 52 to 53-year-old woman. And the layout of the story, the Handmaid's Tale part, the layout of the story is like epistolary form. It's like diary entries, and the narrative jumps forward and backwards in the timeline. There's a lot of flashbacks, and the continuity seems to be somewhat disconnected. And it's a first person from a woman's perspective. And the end, and the end of the book feels a little bit like the ending of the. This is a cryptic note, by the way. This is cryptic. It's not a spoiler, but you might read between the lines a little bit. Read between the lines a little bit. The ending feels also similar to the ending of The Handmaid's Tale. So, how do I put this? And the woman asks the government agents, "Are you doing this to me because I'm Fern asks them, "Are you doing this to me because I'm a woman?" And they say, "Your gender is irrelevant." And it is. For the most part, this doesn't talk about female reproductive rights or females' place in the women's place in the workplace or anything like that. So don't worry. This is feminist in the sense that it was written by a woman and it's the first person narrative of a woman, but it's not about women's rights and women empowerment, if that makes sense. So the narrative structure is like The Handmaid's Tale, and the story itself is reminiscent of Fahrenheit 451. And the re-education center, as well as the what was it? And there's even shout-outs to other works. There's a mention of George Orwell in here, and there's also a mention of Fahrenheit 451. It's actually in the text. There's shout-outs to other books and authors, because this book is about fiction in itself. But what struck me most about this book, all of that is fascinating material. Oh, no. I will postpone talking about what struck me most about this book, because there's one more thing I wanted to say. There's also in the novel your next theme. So like in Fahrenheit 451, similar in this story, a lot of people don't feel like they're in a dystopia. The people who are not avid readers, the people who are not artists, they don't feel persecuted. They have distractions of entertainment. The government is not persecuting them. It's like a saying I read once: first they went after the Jews, but I did nothing because I'm not Jewish. That's a quote from someone in pre-World War II Germany. So it does have the "you're next" narrative, because the next thing the government did after banning fiction is they have some devious scheme in the hospital, in hospitals, to cut costs on healthcare. You'll have to read the book for yourself. I'm not going to spoil that aspect. So it says, oh, one moment it's writers, next moment it's people who are most vulnerable, the sick. The sick and people in need of healthcare. And so, yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to say about this book, but it just slipped my mind. Now I remember why I wanted to, what I wanted to say. So, why is fiction banned? Fiction is banned in this world because there's an overreaction to fake news and lies and propaganda. So the best of intentions leads to a hellish world. Because the government bans fiction, there is one nefarious reason, because fiction points out to various flaws in the political system, in the way a country is run. Sometimes they take the worst extremes and say it could lead to, I don't know, Nazi Germany. It could lead to the Holocaust. So so fiction can point to the worst extremes with our imaginations. And often it doesn't reach those extremes. So then the government accuses people who write fiction of lying and stirring up the crowd to unrest, because they think because the government wants people to look away from their shortcomings. That is why fiction is banned. So there is some nefarious reason to look away from, so that the people will not will look away from the shortcomings of the government, and it's an overreaction to propaganda and lies, an overreaction, because people might react violently because of something someone wrote in a book, like the Turner Diaries, for example. Now, this book focuses a lot on grief. So the 5 parts talk about the 5 stages of the grieving process: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And so the book struck me a lot about feelings of loss and grief. And you'll see why again when you read the book. And near the end of the book, it actually almost brought me to tears. It was that powerful. And the author mentions that this book was also written in 2020 during the COVID lockdowns. This book was written because there was some other inspirations as well, but it was written during COVID-19, during the lockdowns of 2020. And it really spoke to me of all the psychological difficulties a lot of us went through during the lockdowns, during the early months of 2020. I was in a deep depression at that time. My body felt physically heavy. I felt my life was over because I did not know, because I felt like the world was ending with this lockdown. So the book talks about the emotional roller coasters of life, the emotional roller coaster rather of life, and that really was a powerful message that spoke to me. And so yeah, but it is so there is a strong discussion about grief in this book. Now, the 2 things that I would criticize about this book is, one, parts of the book in the middle started dragging out. So the main character seemed to be going through several tics, like going through the same motions before the story moves along a little bit further. There were a lot of tics. So she has to describe her revulsion towards dairy. She's talking to various people, including a tea salesman and her friends, and Hunter, this boy over the phone, and the government agents. They seem to repeat several talking points over and over and over again. It does serve a purpose near the end of the book, because throughout the book you feel that nothing is as it seems. It does serve a purpose towards the end of the book, but it started getting frustratingly repetitive. These you have to go through the motions. She has to go through the motions of these conversations and her revulsion towards dairy before the story could move forward. So in the middle it started dragging a bit. But then the second complaint would be, I don't think I would read this book if it wasn't standing on the shoulders of giants. The Handmaid's Tale, Fahrenheit 451. Even though this is a distinct book, I'll grant the author that, very, very distinct from them, I wouldn't have picked it up if it wasn't standing on the shoulders of giants. I apologize if I repeat myself. So overall, I would rate this book a 9 out of 10.